Hello and welcome to another episode of the Great Show with Jenell, the podcast where we have real conversations about real mental health topics. I'm delighted to bring to you, my listeners, a very special co-host. Her name is Aryanne, and she is a dear friend of mine. Aryanne, would you like to greet our listeners?
Hi, everybody. My name's Aryanne.
Thank you. I am very excited to be putting this episode together for you today. Very grateful that Aryanne has agreed to co-host this episode. I think that what we're going to be doing is pretty important and pretty special. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a little bit of background, but you may or may not know this, but during the pandemic, I was actually in graduate school for mental health counseling. And it was just kind of interesting being both a student learning the clinical side of what our mental health professionals are being taught, while being an individual with a mental illness who has lived the experience of actually having the illness. It was a very interesting experience. One big takeaway I took from this experience was that there's definitely a gap in our education system that needs to be bridged between the real lived experience of what it's like to have mental illness and what clinicians are equipped with to help them.
Clinicians work with the tools they have, and those tools are a lot of times incomplete, and they work as best they can, but I feel like patients could easily contribute more to their own mental health by being able to be more honest with them. And this is not a statement about patients being deceitful. It's a statement about earning that trust for clinicians and then being brave enough to reciprocate as a patient.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. I'm just going to kind of share this story. I remember at one point being in class with, my classmates who are, master's level students getting mental health counseling degrees. They want to go out and help, they want to make a difference in the world. And one of our topics was on medication non-compliance, which this has been a huge part of my, I would say, recovery and lack of recovery journey, medication non-compliance. And I remember one girl just said, she just was completely honest with our professor and just said, I don't understand why people with a diagnosis would ever be med non-compliant. Your medicine helps you get better. And I remember just wanting to just scream like, oh my gosh, girl, you do not get it. Because like what they don't tell you is a lot of the medications aren't going to be the right one for you. A lot of them are going to make you feel like garbage. Some of them might make you drool. Some of them might make you shake. I mean,
some of them might just make you puke. Because lithium, for example, has its therapeutic dose is so close to the toxic dose that some people just puke endlessly on it. I had that experience.
Yeah, and then some medicines make you feel okay, and then that's wonderful.
Yes.
But it's often a guess and check kind of thing, and you're a guinea pig sometimes for several years. In that moment, I suddenly felt like this new sense of purpose of me wanting to somehow just be a part of facilitating a dialogue between people with the real lived experience of mental illness, wanting to get better, and clinicians, which is a clinical understanding of mental illness, wanting to help people, of bridging that gap so that we can work together better and ultimately live in a better world. I mean, I'm not trying to be like naive and happy because, mental illness, it's an ugly topic. There's ugliness and it's yucky. There's a lot of stuff we have to deal with. That's ultimately my goal. I'd like to see us live in a better, healthier world.
More understanding world, for sure.
Absolutely. So for those of you who are not familiar with the DSM-5, I'm just going to give a quick little overview of what it is because we're going to be referencing it in this podcast to give everyone a base understanding for what we're going to be talking about. And Aryanne's going to chime in when I am lacking in this. But the DSM stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Yeah.
And there's been many editions of this. And so we're currently in the 5th edition. Although in a way, my understanding is that revisions are always being drafted and petitioned. And essentially, this is the manual that will outline what needs to be present or not present to receive a specific mental health diagnosis.
Yes.
Would you like to chime in anything, Aryanne?
I would say that it's also a tool for insurance companies to decide if you can receive funding for your mental health journey. And this is problematic because it means that doctors have to pigeonhole you and clinicians before they can begin to treat you. And it sometimes results in like a placeholder diagnosis, and that puts like a history in your chart that makes, if you have to switch doctors, which happens often, you then have to go through and explain exactly kind of your history. And if you don't, it can get lost and you can get labeled with a lot of really stigmatizing things.
Yeah. And one thing that I kind of learned from my experience in graduate school when we were studying the DSM was that, in a way, actually nobody at any one moment in time is actually fully happy with how it is presenting. Everyone has their inputs, everyone is compromising with each other. And so it's a working kind of dynamic document.
Yeah.
So specifically, what Aryanne and I are going to talk about is our lived experience with bipolar disorder type 1. So I've been very honest with my audience that I have bipolar disorder type 1. One of its requirements is to have a full-on manic episode. And Aryanne, you also have bipolar type 1? Or?
I do.
Okay. And so what I would like to do is just read to you the DSM characteristics, requirements for being diagnosed with a manic episode. And then what I would like to do after giving the clinical understanding of what a manic episode looks like, then give Aryanne and I the opportunity to share what the lived experience of a manic episode looks like. So I'm just going to start, and Aryanne should chime in anytime if there's...
Yeah.
So manic episode. A distinct period of abnormally and persistently elevated, expansive, or irritable mood and abnormally and persistently increased goal-directed activity or energy, lasting at least 1 week and present most of the day, nearly every day, or any duration if hospitalization is necessary. B, during the period of mood disturbance and increased energy activity, 3 or more of the following symptoms, 4 if the mood is only irritable, are present to a significant degree and represent a noticeable change from usual behavior. 1, inflated self-esteem or grandiosity. 2, decreased need for sleep. Example, feeling rested after only 3 hours of sleep. 3, more talkative than usual or pressure to keep talking. 4, flight of ideas or subjective experience that thoughts are racing. 5, distractibility. Example, attention too easily drawn to unimportant or irrelevant external stimuli as reported or observed. 6, increase in goal-directed activity, either socially, at work, or sexually, or psychomotor agitation. Example, purposeless non-goal-directed activity. 7, excessive involvement in activities that have a high potential for painful consequences. Examples, engaging in unrestrained buying sprees, sexual indiscretions, or foolish business investments. C, the mood disturbance is sufficiently severe to cause marked impairment in social or occupational functioning or to necessitate hospitalization to prevent harm to self or others, or there are psychotic features. And I'm just going to leave it at that. The rest is kind of disclaimers. Yeah, Aryanne, if there's any that kind of strike you that you want to talk about.
Yeah. I would say that I had early onset of my bipolar disorder. My first manic episode was in high school, and I experienced a lot of the grandiosity and lack of sleep at first.
Can you kind of share with our listeners what actually that experience felt like and what it was like embodying that?
I just had so much energy as soon as it was almost like a risk-taking behavior for me, like in miniature, because I was in school and did have to get up the next day. So in addition to being a rush to be working on these grand plans late at night, being misunderstood by the whole world, and I was going to make like a perpetual motion machine or like invent something great, and everybody would see then that like how great I am or something like that. It was just kind of an intense feeling of misunderstanding in addition to the expansive mood and like experiences of like self-esteem.
Yeah. And if I can just kind of piggyback off that, I know for me, I would just come into this awareness that I was a genius. I would just come in. I was like, oh my gosh, you've got it, Jenell. You've solved it. I would believe I could. And for me, because I have a math background, my behaviors kind of, I kind of got away with it for a while because I did math problems all the time. That was normal for me. So I'd start solving these impossible math problems. I was like, and I just realized, like, you got it, Jenell. You're a genius. And I just want to say, kind of that misunderstood genius, feeling like a genius. That's kind of fun.
It's intoxicating.
It's very fun. And I mean, it's annoying to be around. And when people burst your bubble and say, Jenell, like,
that's where the irritability
that's what I'm saying.
You're like, just like, oh my God, how dare you?
Yeah. Like I had a boyfriend say to me, like, yeah, so I don't see how this proves the twin prime conjecture, Jenell. I'm writing all these proofs. And just the fact that he would question my reality. I mean, I just turned, and then I like turned to like mega bitch, like, how dare you, grabbing the papers. You don't understand. Yeah. I really like how you say like that misunderstood.
Yeah. It is, it's intoxicating, and it has its own charm to be misunderstood because it buffers you from the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Because if someone rejects your reality, you're like, that's okay. They just don't understand my genius or my uniqueness, whatever it happens to be. It's just very intense, like buffering from reality because obviously they wouldn't understand.
Exactly. And I also just like want to throw out there, this is going to sound like kind of cheesy, that there is a silver lining to our illness. There's something great about being a big thinker. There's something great about being an innovator, dreaming big, And so it's just bipolar just rides a fine line, of like taking something that could be good and could be channeled if you were healthy in a really healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
And turning it into something that can rob you of your life. It can rob you of your freedom. It can hurt people, know? And so that's why, I mean, we laugh because it is funny. And, there was a time where, when my doctors put me on medication, I decided to stay on it. I said, like, well, they stole they're stealing my Manic light, and people would be like, Jenell, you need to stop romanticizing your illness. And that's not what I want to do in this episode. I mean, but I still want to say it's still funny. Like, we can laugh about it.
We get to laugh. You guys don't get to laugh.
We get to laugh. And I just want to say I want to acknowledge the risk of romanticizing the illness.
Yeah. And that is out there. It does feel so good when you're up there. It feels like you can do no wrong. And so, yeah, it's just a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah. And that's another thing. People will say, like, maybe an innocent grad student who wants to be, a mental health counselor and help the world, who's 24 years old. And they may say, well, why wouldn't they take their medication? Well, because being manic feels so good.
Yes.
And then when they say we're going to take medication, it's going to take that all away from you and give you all these side effects you never asked for. That's a hard sell.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell to someone who's not self-aware enough to know how destructive, who doesn't have a history of destroying their whole life. Mm-hmm. I think for me, I had to destroy my whole life and see a pile of ruin before I said, all right, maybe I'll try someone else's way because my way didn't really work.
Yeah. No, same. Big same. In my early 20s, it was just like, well, it was easier to say no, my way is better because I hadn't yet experienced the consequences.
Yeah. So I'm writing a book for people with bipolar. And, when it's out, I definitely love to give my listeners a free copy or a preview or a PDF. Essentially what I'm writing to is from myself, who's at the time of this recording, late 30s. What I wish someone had told my 22-year-old self, that if my 22-year-old self could have received it, and because I just want to say bipolar looks very different from late teens, early 20s to mid to late 30s.
Yep, I totally agree. But we do have to keep in mind that not everybody learns in the same way from their experiences. So
maybe people could learn just from hearing and they would bypass.
Or on the other hand, some people won't learn from it no matter what because they have a hard time. Maybe the circumstances of their life conspired to make them feel especially victimized by their illness. And then by the system that addresses their illness. And so they deny it harder than maybe you or me. That is a valid mode of existence, if a painful one.
I completely agree. I'm just I'm processing what you said about having a victim approach to saying, I'm going to be completely proactive in every way in which I have control, which isn't over everything, to fight for my wellness. Like that, I came to that when I was in my late 20s.
I probably didn't come to it until I was in my 30s,
Okay.
very early 30s, maybe 30 or like 2016. However old I was then, I can't do math.
Okay.
36 now, in 2023. So take that for what you will. I really wasn't done making mistakes over it until then. I think everybody has that moment.
Yeah.
Where they're just like, wow, I can't keep doing this. My bones hurt. I'm old. I need to stop.
Yeah. I know for me, when I kind of realized, I just systematically burnt and destroyed relationships that were so important to me when I was well, and really coming to feel, even though I'll never totally feel it, how much I hurt people who loved me. That was the biggest motivator. And then also, for me, then soon after, I feel like I really became proactive in my recovery. Then I became a mom. And that definitely is a huge motivator for like wanting to do right by my child.
I've never experienced having a child. I've had an instance of being held accountable by a child, and I'll tell you that right now that is like very sobering very quickly. And I'm sure that might be some of what you're discussing, is because you have to be well for your child, and even just interacting with that child that one time and having them go, I don't understand what you're saying, or that seems silly, or something like that, or laughing. When I think everything is serious and important, is holding you accountable in a way that few other things can.
Yeah. As we comment on this list, I feel like this list talks about increase, let's see how they word it. Goal-directed activity. And then one of them is sexual indiscretions.
Yes.
So I remember at one point, I thought it was termed, and maybe this was in the DSM-4, I thought it was actually termed hypersexuality.
I thought it was too.
Yeah, and so that might have been in the DSM-4. And I always just I want to comment on this. I want us to talk about this.
Yeah, that's
I really do. Because this is something to wrestle with. And I there's a couple dynamics to this, and I also just want to share my experience with this. So for one, there's a lot of just moral judgment on sexuality, especially in our culture.
Yeah, even normal sexuality.
Like normal sexuality, yeah. In our culture. And there's this part of me that wants to say, okay, well, what is hypersexuality? What does that look like? But before even going to that, let's say hypersexuality is a symptom of a real physiological illness that has a moral judgment of sinful. And let's say, just for example, let's say you're a Christian in America. You have bipolar disorder. You experience hypersexuality, and it is judged as morally unacceptable. I just want to say, what are you supposed to do with that? I just want to say it really puts people in a challenging position to like get help when they're just being judged as a slut or sinful, or just like judged.
Yes.
In a sense, all of these symptoms can be skewed to be seen as sin, I think.
Yes.
And
it's from an outsider's perspective, as far as, Christianity, it is something that I've become very wary, and it's a huge shame, because spirituality and religion can be beautiful, but they can't be beautiful if the people, I don't want to say in charge, but there's these ingrained ideas that have been kind of inserted after the fact of the love that Jesus gave Christians. afterwards we slip in all these things like people who are mentally ill have demons, people who commit suicide go to hell, people who experience hallucinations and delusions. Yeah, the demons thing.
Yeah,
It's big.
absolutely. I just want to acknowledge the trickiness of the situation. I mean, and I'm not even speaking for all mental illness, but yes, of people who struggle with very real, physiologically based mental illnesses, who also want to be supported and included in a, let's say, like a church and a body of believers who may come at their symptoms with judgment, not actually practical tools to help them navigate their illness and achieve the best possible outcome, achieve wellness,
One of the things that I would say is worse than a person's misunderstanding about your illness in a spiritual context is a refusal of things that could be helpful to you, like medication.
Mm-hmm.
The discouraged like talk that you get from some minority of people in the Christian community
Absolutely.
when you are wanting to be proactive about your health and take medication is very negative.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, my dad has been through the thick and thin with me of my mental illness, right? He's supported me, and he's also made mistakes too, because that's the reality of it. Even the people you love, even when you love somebody, you're going to make mistakes on the journey. But I remember my dad was like, we're driving somewhere and he was telling me all about how vitamins can cure everything. And that in this day and age of our modern understanding of nutrition, there's no need to take pharmaceuticals for anything. Meanwhile, this is the same person who's been telling me to take my meds. So I just said, well, what about me? Should I take my medication or should I just take vitamins? And then my dad just looked at me and said, well, your case is a little different from what I'm talking about. So he's generalizing the whole population, but then he's like, well, except for you. Then you take your meds.
It's very, you take your meds.
Yeah.
It's very isolating. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I want to get back to this hypersexuality thing.
Yes. Sorry. We got a little sidetracked.
Yeah. So I want to share my perspective on hypersexuality because I've thought about it for a while and I'm thinking about it in this book I'm writing. And so this is what I'm going to share with my listeners, what hypersexuality feels like when you're actually experiencing a manic episode. This is what it feels like for me. And this is coming from like a heterosexual female. I go to bed one night, and I wake up. It's a wonderful day. It's going to be a great day. I just tell something great is going to happen. And then I get dressed, I go outside, and I interact with the world, and I start seeing the people in the world. And half of the population, the boys, suddenly overnight, they all just got a lot cuter. Like suddenly, I don't know what happened, but all the boys, and I mean all of them, like they're just like sparkling, and they all got a lot cuter. And it's a fun reality to live in where boys are cute and not disgusting.
Ouch. I guess I would say to that yeah, you find like this redeeming quality.
Yes.
Even in like the scummiest guys. You're just like, but they're so smart or they're funny or whatever. And like, yeah, generally, if they're not also a scumbag, those are great reasons to hang on to a guy. But like, you're turned on physically by all these minor things.
Now, you have a whole theory about the one redeeming quality, right?
Oh,
do you want to share?
That's a little bit of an aside. But
okay.
I for my whole life, I was like, one redeeming quality makes a friend.
Okay.
And so I was just like, but since I was hypersexual for most of the time, I was also sleeping with my friends. So it's a mixed bag for sure. But like, because of these two combinations of circumstances with the hypersexuality and the one redeeming characteristic, I slept with so many people that I should not have slept with. And so, yeah, that's my one redeeming quality theory that kind of failed me a little bit.
And and that's kind of, again, where there's this like double-edged sword of like sleeping around can hurt people. People can get hurt.
Yeah.
Thinking that it meant more than maybe it did mean, you know?
Yes. Big experiences with that personally.
Yeah.
Serious time. I get when I'm hypersexual on the extreme end of that hypersexuality, I experience almost predatory behavior with sex. I guess I would seek out virgins and be interested in virgins because it was a new experience for them, and then live vicariously through their unique experience. But it didn't mean anything emotionally to me. And that is super messed up. And I hope that it's like when I came out of that particular manic episode in which I slept with like 5 virgins in a row. And then I was out of that episode and I was like, I didn't even do a good job. I was too busy living through their experiences and like being in my own world, imagining how they feel instead of actually paying attention to how they feel. It's such a huge difference. So yeah, that's largely my experience with hypersexuality is one of regret. I wouldn't say sin, but I would say regret for me.
Yeah. It's tricky for me because, you know, I'm a fun-loving kind of gal.
Yeah.
I'm a fun-loving gal. And so, you know, sex is fun, you know, sex is fun, and getting to know maybe a stranger that intimately is like exciting because like what are you gonna discover, you know? But I definitely remember this one time. This kind of goes with this goal-oriented activity. I remember like, I don't know, I was just not in my right mind. I remember I was just walking in Ames, Iowa, and I saw the Toyota dealership and I thought, I'm gonna buy a car today. I had really good credit. And so I just went in and lied about my income and left with a car.
Wow.
I didn't even have a driver's license.
I've never heard that story.
Yeah, so I didn't. It was a Scion IQ, so it's one of those tiny little cars.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, so I bought the Scion IQ on credit, and the guy, I didn't have a driver's license, and so the guy said, "Well, I can't let you drive off my park legally without a driver's license." He goes, "So go to your apartment, and I'll drive the car to you and give you the keys." So he was totally horrible. So then I decide. And I had a bunny, of course. I had a bunny. I'm like, I'm gonna go to Chicago. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Chicago. I'm like, I think I had $40. So I remember I was just doing all these bizarre things. Like I stopped in Iowa City and I wanted to see somebody. I think I literally wanted to harass my dad because my dad worked in Iowa City. Again, that's just the theme of my episode. No. So it's just like harassing my dad. Long story short is by the time I parked in the hospital parking ramp, I literally had no money, no gas.
Yeah.
So I like, you know, you're in these tricky situations.
Yeah.
But you're like, you got this goal-oriented, you know, mindset, like I can accomplish anything. So I maybe had just enough gas to like get somewhere. And I was like, I don't have enough money to pay my parking ticket, like my ticket to the ramp. Yeah. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'll just flirt with the teller and he'll lift it for me, right? So, you know, long story short, I have sex with him in the toll booth. And I started flirting with him, and then I was like, oh, I kind of want to sleep with him. And then having sex with this guy in the toll booth, and he's just awesome. I mean, he is total fun. He is just down for anything. He's adorable. I mean, I was manic, but he was hot. He was sexy. He was a law school dropout who's working in a toll booth. Some reason I thought that was kind of hot. And I remember I'm sorry. You think that's funny?
Yes, it's amazing. It's a perfect like encapsulation of what it's like to be hypersexual. Law school dropouts are so hot.
Law school dropout working in a toll booth. That was kind of hot. You know, we're just having this great time. We're having sex in the toll booth. Like, I mean, he's sitting on his chair and I'm on top, and we're having sex, and just people drive up. I'm just pushing the button, lifting the thing. Jesus. You know? And then I remember, long story short, I end up in like an MHI over this whole incident. I go to like more or less prison for crazy people. And I remember I'm talking with psychologists. I'm like, they're using this example of like why I was like, why am I here? What did I do that was so wrong? And they're explaining like, well, Jenell, you had sex with a stranger in a toll booth in a public place. And I said, so what? And then I remember she said, well, did you use protection? And I said, no, but why is that the point? Why am I held to a different standard than the rest of the population? The rest of the population isn't required to use protection every time they have sex.
Yeah.
And again, I just felt like, I don't know. this might just be something I wrestle with, but I just felt like I was getting like discriminated against as like, well, clearly you're a threat to yourself if you have unprotected sex. I'm like, well, people have unprotected sex all the time and they're not.
Yeah, I feel like the thing that they're doing is building a case against you. And it's easier to build a case against someone if they don't fight you. So they're piling on these various offenses that you have committed, and in totality they equal to you are manic and a danger of some sort. And then, you know, they're hoping that at some point you go, oh, you're right. They're hoping they get through to you. So they're kind of merciless and maybe even unfair. And that's where you get that, like, and then that can set off your misunderstood genius vibes. And you're just like, they don't understand me.
Yeah, because I'm still laughing about how I'm like, yeah, I was a law school dropout. That was hot.
That was very hot. You know?
Yeah. And so I just want to throw this out there that, you know, we're laughing and joking about this, obviously, but it really wasn't funny. In the sense that of what ended up costing me, right? I found myself in Chicago. Somehow I found myself in Chicago barefoot on the beach because my shoes I like wasn't wearing socks and I wasn't wearing walking shoes. So I had these huge blisters on my feet with this bunny who needed water. I mean, I had this like bizarre situation. And, you know, at one point but I knew people in Chicago. So like I drove to my uncle's house and he's just confused. Everyone's confused about what's going on with me. And I'm saying all this crazy stuff. And yeah, somehow, I mean, and, you know, and then obviously I didn't have money to pay for that car.
Yeah.
So, I just did a voluntary repossession. Like, I mean, I just called them and said like, I don't have money to pay for this car. And so like a voluntary repo on your not that this is the end of the world, but on your credit report is more or less like a bankruptcy.
Yeah.
It stays on there for 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, I was like, I was in a mental hospital. I had no way of earning income to pay for my car payment.
Even if you had been
So
ready to go back to work.
That was and it was a headache for everyone involved. You know, my dad was dealing with stuff like transporting the car to the Toyota dealership, and you know, my dad's screaming at the guy who sold the car to me. He's like, couldn't you tell this girl was crazy?
My grandma does that too. Like, I mean, okay, so mental illness is kind of rampant in my family.
Okay.
My uncle and my mom and me are all just like on the same page sometimes. And so my grandma, who takes care of us all at times, is like, can't you tell when you see a person that is not in their right mind? I know you knew. And I've just watched her do this. And like the bravery and the balls that it takes to do something like that. Yeah. But I totally get what you're saying is like, it's a huge headache for everybody involved, and bless my grandmother, bless her.
On the topic of, didn't you know, I have this hilarious story. Well, it's listen, you guys are gonna pick up on this, and maybe I'll bring this to therapy. Obviously, I have to work out some issues I have with my dad because he just keeps coming up. But every time I'm in the hospital, my entire hospital stay revolves around tricking and provoking my father. And I'm kind of a little bit mischievous at heart. Wouldn't you say that's accurate? So, you know, I learned that I could use their phones and dial 0 and get to the operator. And then I could have the operator, who doesn't know it's me, I'd transfer me to the VA hospital where my dad worked. And then I'd have the VA operator transfer me to my dad's line. So I'd go through all these hoops because I'm just dialing 0 so I can use their phone.
Yeah.
And they don't know who it's me. So I'd always pretend to be a nurse or a doctor. I'd always say I'm nurse current. That's like my thing. So I'd pretend to be nurse current and I'd relay all these bizarre, crazy things to my dad. And he'd just be like, once I said that I was getting ECTs the next day and that he needed to sign a release and something.
Oh my gosh, that's awful.
And then he's calling the nurse and screaming at them about how like I didn't need ECTs because I didn't.
Yeah.
And they're like all confused and
they're like, wait, what?
Yeah, and then I'd leave these long, lengthy voicemail messages for him that just like confuse him.
Yeah.
And
you're awful.
And
you're not awful.
But the thing is, my stepmom, she sees right through it. Like my dad was all tormented by all these voicemails he had. And then my stepmom's like, you don't believe for a second that those are real. She's like, that's Jenell. That's Jenell pretending to be Nurse Corinne. Like my stepmom sees it like, Steve, like, and then he's like,
Oh no.
yeah.
Must be a relief for him though sometimes.
Well, I'm so glad he married her.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm glad that I feel like the men in my family have married sensible women. Like within the Nyberg system, we're all kind of screwed up, but the men have married
I like
sensible
the system.
women.
The Nyberg system.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is hypersexuality and family ordeals.
Yeah. I want to kind of give our listeners, wherever they are, whether they are supporters of people with mental illness, whether they have a mental illness, whether they're clinicians, I really want to leave them with something practical that would help them support someone with mental illness. So
Okay.
I'm going to just start kind of with just what naturally comes to mind.
Okay.
Which is when I was just completely not in touch with reality. Because at some point, it becomes appealing to leave reality and not come back.
Yes.
Reality's starting to look pretty bad.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point I was just exiting reality. I was believing things about building computers that ran on a trinary operating system. So I was going to divide 1 by 0 and get infinity. I mean, I was just not in touch with reality. And my dad had both of my uncles come visit me. And one of my uncles has bipolar disorder. He kind of lives a really healthy, productive life. And we're walking the halls. Because you get it. When you're in the hospital,
yeah,
you walk.
that's all there's to do.
So we're walking the halls and I'm telling him all about my computer. And he just listened. And he said, Jenell, what he did was he validated what I was experiencing while offering me hope that maybe there could be something better if I would consider it. And so I kind of want to share what he did that really got to me. He just said, Jenell, he kind of pointed to like my head, and the hospital goes, all of this, this computer, and, he's like, he goes, he didn't even say it was great, but he validated that it existed and that it was relevant and important to me in the moment. He's like, that's all okay. But then he pointed outside, like almost saying like, but the whole world out there goes, it's good out there too. He's like,
wow.
He's like, this could be good, but I'm telling you, out there, it's also good.
Wow.
And then he told me, he's like, I don't have to go to work every day, but I do. Because out there, like saying like in the world, he's like, it's good.
Yeah.
But he said it in such a simple way, but it to me conveyed that he understood the depth of like what he was up against, of like this exiting reality and saying like, there is something valid. He didn't completely invalidate it.
Yeah.
And that's what made what he said so powerful.
Wow.
Yeah, it was huge. He's like, in here is okay, but just out there, that's good too. And that's when I decided maybe I'll try it their way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's what an incredible guy.
It was a really incredible experience, very profound experience. And so that's what my advice, because that was so profound for me, is like, I just want to say what you don't want to do really to anybody ever is invalidate their lived experience. I kind of want to say like, you don't want to do that. Even if it's not based in a reality you live in or that anybody accepts is okay.
You can be supportive and be a guiding force for reality. You can do both of those things. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No. I just want to say like, people who are maybe not compliant with treatment or who are being destructive or behaving in these behaviors, there is some compelling reason why. And I just feel like on some level that needs to be acknowledged and validated. And then if you have a way to be a part of offering something that maybe in the end could be better for them, of course, if you love them, you want that for them. And so that's what that's my only piece of advice is like, don't invalidate their experience. Because, I've had people say like, well, the Manic episode, that's essentially being high on meth. It's just like, it's like So you're pretty much a drug addict. And so if you aren't seeking treatment or if you're romanticizing your illness, you're just as bad as a tweaker. And, and tweakers are, like all the stuff. And I kind of want to say, like, okay, my experiences weren't always grounded in reality, thinking that my reflection in the mirror was an alien and that this alien was telling me to shave my head so that antenna could come out of my scalp and the twin prime conjecture could be downloaded directly to me from a satellite dish. Okay, that wasn't real.
Right.
But I also still want to say that experience was pretty incredible for me. That was a profound, in my experience, in my lived experience, I encountered an alien who was going to give me the coolest proof ever right into my brain. It was so cool. I was so excited, and I just want to say, even though it's crazy and it's not real, there's still something valid to it.
Yeah, I also want to put in there that drug addicts, even meth addicts, are not to be they don't exist to be shat on.
And I'm sorry if I sounded that way.
No, you did not. But whoever said that to you does not have an understanding of addiction.
I was mirroring the language of someone who said that to me, who used to be a meth addict and has a lot of judgment around meth use. Yeah. And after I said that, I realized that I had used that language.
You're just repeating what they said, but that makes me really sad.
Yeah, no, it is sad.
Please, yeah. Yeah. I would say if there's one thing that I would encourage in allies of people who are mentally ill is, I'm just going to use a story. When I met my wife, I was in a manic state, kind of in a daze on her older brother's floor. I was living there because I had no place to live, and he took in stray people. And I met her, and once we started dating, I was still manic.
How long did your episode last?
Oh my God, just so long. I had lulls in there where I was I would just crash and sleep, and then I would just be right back up. And we started dating, and I just was constantly self-sabotaging our relationship. And I don't want to put the onus on the person who is the ally, because that's not really fair, but she never gave up on me, and she didn't take it personally. She didn't accept the behavior because that would be counterproductive, but she didn't cast judgment on me. So suspend your judgment and make a differentiation between accepting the behavior and accepting that it happened. You can accept that it happened and try to move forward.
I feel like you're saying accept and support the person, but don't condone the behavior necessarily.
Yes.
But still accept and support and affirm the person.
Yes. And that's kind of what you said. But if you can weather the storm and make it through the worst times, it's the biggest gift you can give anybody who has an illness like ours.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm kind of teasing this out to my listeners that I'm working actually on 2 separate writing projects right now, but I'm just truly believing that having a mental illness and surviving it and fighting for your wellness and, coming to terms with all that you have done when you've been sick and everything, it actually refines your character over time. I think that not everyone's going to respond the same way, but I think it can be a breeding ground for resiliency and maybe personal responsibility.
I would definitely vibe with the responsibility.
Okay.
Because if you ever stop and face what you've done, you don't have a choice but to accept the responsibility. Mm-hmm. Once you stop and you've gotten your life a little bit, just enough together to re-enter reality, you see the consequences all around you.
Yeah.
And it's humbling. So it creates an amount of humility in you. And then you begin to pick up the pieces, and it only deepens your understanding of the difficulties that you've caused and the responsibilities that you have as a result.
Yeah. I'm writing this book about when I was 24, I I found myself homeless. I was, well, I'd been officially diagnosed at age 22, and then between age 22 and 24, I just pretty much was in and out of hospitals nonstop until I was at the point where I was homeless living on a friend's couch. And what I ended up doing was I bought a bicycle for $10 at a garage sale and rode it across the country for 3 months solo. And it's funny. And it ended up being this real turning point in my life. And I'm writing a book about that experience. But what I want to, and people, when they hear that I did this bike ride, people will be like, I can't believe that. That sounds amazing. And a part of me wants to say, I don't think getting up every day and just putting one foot in front of the other to pedal a bicycle is any harder than, say, even though we weren't talking about depression, waking up one day after a month-long depression and saying, today I'm going to brush my teeth. Like, I don't see either one as easier or harder, you know? That's why I think people who fight for their health, I think it can be breeding ground for a lot of character development. That's what I want to say.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this was a pretty good podcast.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, I just, for one, want to say thank you, Aryanne, for contributing.
Yeah, I had a really good time. Really nervous.
Yeah.
Really glad I did it, though.
Thank you. So good to hear. And what I absolutely would just be thrilled to have is if you listen to this podcast or share it with someone who you think would be interested, I absolutely would love to continue the discussion. Again, I have lived experience with bipolar disorder, but any discussion on mental health topics, if you know of anyone who would like to be a guest contributor or just you can want to be part of the discussion, I will link my email and phone number in the description of this podcast. But this is just kind of my thing. I always give my phone number out on every podcast. So you can just text me or call me anytime. It's 515-215-5114. Once again, thank you. And take care of each other.
Be kind.
Bye-bye.